Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Mancus Public Library, one of our author talks. This morning, we are thrilled to have Lowell Volk with us. Lowell is a native of Minnesota, but he retired in 2004, and now he's very active in his community of Pleasant View. He is a former member of the Montezuma County Sheriff's Department, the Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers, the Western Writers of America, and Lowell has a BS from California Lutheran in computer science and an MBA from the University of Laverne. When he's not traveling to Wild West events and Civil War reenactments, he enjoys horseback riding, deer and elk hunting, and early American history. Lowell writes historical fiction and has published at least 15 books that include the Luke Taylor series. And that's one of the ones that I just finished. I loved it. The Taylor series is set during the time of the Civil War. These books are steeped in well-researched history, have lovely character development, and move at a very interesting pace. They're action-packed and they pull you in. Great descriptors and super storylines. So that's Lowell Volk. Good morning, Lowell.
Good morning.
Now, you have a background in technical services and you retired from General Dynamics. How did your interest in the Civil War and the West develop?
Well, when I worked for General Dynamics, when I retired from them, I had 65 software engineers working for me scattered all over the world. So I used to do a lot of traveling. And I did a lot of meetings in the DC area. And we did a lot of technical writing while I was working for them. But I decided I'd like to do some history writing or fiction writing. And I wanted to write about the West. So I needed to figure out where I wanted to start. So I decided to start with the Civil War because I would go back in the DC area and I could visit some of those areas before I even started writing.
Interesting. Now your characters really come alive. How do you find your characters?
My characters, I don't look, if you notice, I don't go after the real famous people. Mm-hmm. What I look for are the people like every day, your neighbor, my neighbor, people that are not, these are heroes in themselves. They don't necessarily go out and grab the limelight, but in their everyday life, the way they survive and they continue, those are the characters that I look for.
Mm-hmm. And what's your process as you're developing these characters?
I probably got the most unorthodox process for writing books of anything. I usually know when I start a book, I know where it's going to start and I know where it's going to end. How it's going to get there, I don't know until I write it.
I love that. I love that. Now, who or what has been a major inspiration for you in your writing?
I would have to say, when I did all this traveling, I used to do a lot of reading on airplanes. Mm-hmm. And I read a lot of Louis L'Amour books. And I'd have to say that the way he writes and the way he brings out characters and stuff was probably one of the most influential writers that I've known.
That makes sense after reading both of you, yes. Now, you enjoy going to reenactments. Do they play any part in your character development or storylines?
They add, or they kind of come back and tell me that I've done something right in some of it. But as far as what they're doing, they're reenacting like a battle or something. We've been to Gettysburg 3 times. Mm-hmm. We were there for the 100th anniversary and we've seen some of the battles that transpired there. In fact, I was selling books at all 3 of them. And we've done Patagonia. We've had several other places that we've gone to for reenactments out in California. And a lot of them are more interesting to look at and look at the costumes or the uniforms that they wear to give more authentication to like my parts of the Civil War.
Right, they add flavor, yes. Now, you've already spoken about Louis L'Amour, but is there any one person who's a hero that particularly inspired you?
No, I can't state that there's any particularly one person.
Okay.
But there's a lot of people out there that over the years that I've talked to. In fact, I do a lot of reading now, even today. I do book reviews for True West magazine. I also do book reviews for Roundup magazine. And so I get a lot of books from them. And it's interesting to sit down and read these books, see the way that they characterize people, the way that they get their books to flow. And that gives me some influence on what I do with my books too.
Interesting. Yeah. Now, you grew up in Minnesota. Can you talk about your childhood there a little bit?
Well, you might say my childhood started at a very early age with the idea of working with a paper route. I had a paper route. From there, I went to work on a farm for a couple of years. I worked in a garage, Nash garage at the time where I bought my first car, worked in a gas station, worked with my dad in my dad's shop as an electrician. I used to have to climb utility poles and do house wiring and working with the people that worked there. So I decided that I wanted to go and become an electrician. And I was going to be an electrician and come back and work with my dad. So I went to Minneapolis to school after I graduated, went to be an electrician. While I was there going to school, my dad sold the business. And I ended up going to work for an electric supply company in Minneapolis before I went into the Air Force, which I got into electronics. And then I stayed in electronics after that.
Now, it's a long way from Minnesota to Pleasant View. How did you choose to end up out here?
Well, after I got out of the Air Force, I went to work for a company in Minneapolis that transferred me to Chicago, from Chicago to Boulder. And in 1974, they said, we need you to go to California for 4 days. Well, we moved here in December of 2004, 30 years later, from California. And when one of the guys that worked for me, his mother lived here in Cortez, and his sister and brother-in-law have a plumbing store here in Cortez. And we used to come out this way, him and I did, on motorcycles. And when we decided we were going to retire, we looked around and we came through here on our way to northern Colorado and came back and ended up buying 40 acres out here.
Nice. And you're active with the sheriff's department, the fire department?
I'm on the board of directors of the Pleasant View Fire Protection District.
I thought I read that, yes.
And I was also a deputy sheriff for court security for the Montezuma County Sheriff's Department. I'm also been part of the Montezuma Posse. I've been our church president. I substitute taught for 10 years out here, kindergarten through 12th grade. When I first retired and got here, the first weekend here, my wife handed me the want ads and said, find something to do.
Well, it sounds like you did. You grew roots quickly.
And in the meantime, I've been writing books.
In the meantime, speaking of which, you are going to grace us with a reading from one of your books this morning. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that and read for us?
Yes, the book that is one that just got released last year, and it's called Trouble in the Mancus Valley. And it's a story. It's actually a story about a family near Mancus, the Burton family, and Jake is one of the main characters in it. And it talks about their troubles and stuff that transpired with the family as they're going on. This takes place in the later 1800s. Jake had some problems with his father, he'd gone to Texas to try and recoup and get away from him when he gets a letter from his sister. And I'm going to start with the letter. It says, "Dear Jake, I hope this finds you before it's too late. I regret to inform you of what has been going on. After you left, a new man by the name of Gifford Clemens came to town and has been causing trouble for the local ranchers, trying to purchase all the ranches in the valley. Father was worried that our ranch was going to be next, as some of our cattle have come up missing. When Father went to check on the herd in the North Valley, he was shot. When one of our hands went to check on the herd, he found Dad shot in the back. He was able to get him home before he died, but Pa never woke up before he passed. No one knows who shot him, but we believe that it was the new man who wanted all the land in the valley. I'm afraid that is not all the bad news. When the sheriff was out investigating Pa's death, he was shot in the same place. I'm afraid that Howard is now in danger. He could be killed next. All our problems seem to have started since Gifford Clemens arrived in Mancus. He set up a law office in town and has brought several ranchers in the area. Lately, he has been after me to sell the Double B. Several of the other ranchers sold out to Gifford when they couldn't pay their loans. Gifford had somehow ended up holding their loans from the bank. When they couldn't pay, he ran them out. Some were found dead, which left their ranches for the taking. Howard suspects that Gifford is behind the killing of our father and the other ranchers, but can't prove it. I hope this finds you soon and that you can come home, as we need your help. Pa has left half the ranch to you, your sister Sally." Jake then starts for home. It was after sunset on the third day. Jake was hot and tired, with dust plugging his nose and grumbling in his stomach, said he needed to eat. His horse was lathered, exhausted, and needed rest and some grain. The sun had been unbearably hot throughout the day. When Jake stopped atop a hill of a small valley, he spotted the lights of a town. The sense of relief came over him. However, he had reached Santa Fe. When he rode into town, his first stop was at the livery stable, where he called out for the owner. When nobody answered, he reckoned he would pay the stable fee later. Right now, he needed to take care of his horse. After his horse was cooled down and fed, Jake walked to a small cafe. Inside, the smell of fresh coffee and cooking meat filled his nostrils. After he placed his order, it seemed like it was taking forever for the food to arrive. When the waitress set the steak down in front of him, the only thing on his mind was to consume it. While he ate, he overheard two men talking about a poker game going on in the saloon. He finished and paid his meal, looking at what money he had left. He had been lucky in poker before. Maybe the game is a friendly one and I can pick up some extra money while giving my horse a chance to rest. Jake walked across the street, entered the saloon, and inside looked like most other saloons he had been in. Located in the center of the room was a poker game in progress. A scarred wooden counter stretched almost the length of the building was used as the bar. In the middle of the wall behind the bar, he noticed a mirror and a painting showing a scantily clad lady. On each side of the mirror was a shelf stacked with whiskey bottles. Jake felt like he could have been in this bar before. Four men were standing at the bar drinking and talking. They all turned and looked at Jake as he walked over and ordered a beer. With his drink in hand, he turned his back to the bar to watch the game. The game was going. He evaluated the five men sitting at the table. One of the fellows facing the bar was dressed in a black frock coat, silver vest, white shirt, black string tie, and a black flat brim hat. The man's face sprouted a black mustache below a large hooked nose, between two dark eyes with thick brown eyebrows above them. There was an old scar just below his left eye. Jake sized him as being none too friendly and the one he would have to watch. He had the looks of a professional gambler. The player next to him wore a bright shirt under a black leather vest. A dusty white hat sat on his head, looking like it had been there for some time. The light blue eyes watched the others as new round of cards were dealt. He kept his hands on the table, tapping his index finger indicating he was nervous. The small amount of money remaining in front of him showing that he was not doing well. Jake had seen men like him before making careless bets and knew he was one he wouldn't have to worry about. The player to his left wore horn-rimmed glasses riding low on his nose. His gray hair felt in unkempt straggles across his shoulder. His leathery brown skin showed he had spent a lot of time in the sun. He wore a blue jacket with a hole in the sleeve of his left arm. The black pants were held up by a belt adorned with a wide silver buckle. He had a gun stuck in his waistband. Jake could see that he was tough, honest, and wouldn't back down. Jake surmised that the man next to him must have been the local blacksmith who probably ran the livery stable. The man's arm showed enough strength to kill a person. He seemed to be paying conservatory with the money still in front of him. Jake figured he had worked hard for his money and wasn't about to throw it away. He was another one he wouldn't have to look out for. The last man, who had his back to Jake, wore a brown jacket and hat. His black hair hung down to the collar of his shirt. And when he turned his head, Jake saw that he had a dark beard, mustache. He too had a sum of money in front of him, indicating that he had been doing well. Jack wondered if he and the first man were working the table together. He would have to watch both. The chair next to the last player was empty. So after watching a dozen hands, Jake walked over to the table and asked, "Is this a private game or can anyone sit in?" The man in the black coat sized him up and said, "Sit down, friend. This is a friendly game." Jake noted that even with the man's voice sounded black, he was sure that he was the one to watch. Shortly after sitting down, Jake drew his Colt 44 from his holster and laid it on his leg like he always did when he entered a game. What he did not know the other players. He started to relax after winning two hands. However, he kept his eye on the man in black. The blacksmith and the man with the blue eyes decided they had had enough. They got up and left the game. Going to the bar, Jake's luck turned some as he lost the next hand. For the next 2 hours, the game continued to go back and forth. Jake was not winning a lot, nor was he losing a lot. After losing another hand, he began to wonder if the man who had offered him a seat, who was the dealer at the time, was taking cards from the bottom of the deck. The next hand, Jake got 5 good cards, 2 aces and 2 tens. He felt his luck was returning and raised the bet. The man in the black coat folded. The other 2 called and Jake won the pot of $200. During the next hand, he received a good hand of cards dealt by the man in the black coat. It didn't take long for the betting to go heavy as the pot grew to over $1,000. Jake asked for 2 cards, while the man in the black coat took 1. Still not trusting him, Jake watched his hand and saw him start to draw a card from the bottom of the deck. "Hold it, mister," Jake growled, still watching his hand. "Put that deck on the table before you draw and take the top card." The dealer looked at Jake. "What are you saying?" "I saw you try to take a card from the bottom of the deck." "Are you calling me a cheat?" the dealer asked, staring at Jake. He put the deck on the table in front of him while pushing back his chair. "That's what we call men like you in the Colorado Territory," Jake replied, watching the man's eyes as he pushed the chair back. What do you call them here? Reaching inside his coat, the man pulled a 32 Colt from a cross-draw holster. Watching his movement, Jake had moved his hand up to his lap and was already grabbing his Colt. The dealer brought his gun out and they both fired at the same time. The dealer's bullet whizzed past Jake's ear, but Jake's shot caught the man in the head. He fell back, slowly rolling over in the chair and blood pouring from the wound. Those who had been sitting at the table had backed away as soon as the controversy started. Knowing there was going to be gunplay, not wanting any part of it, they watched as the scene played out. Jake stood and moved around the table, putting his back to the wall and keeping his gun ready in case anyone had objections. The man in the brown coat called out, "I didn't see him deal that card from the bottom." Jake pointed his gun at him and ordered, "Come here and turn his cards over." The man came over the table, turned the dead man's hand over, showing that it held 3 kings and a 9. "Now turn over the top card on the deck," Jake commanded. The man slowly reached for the deck and turned over the top card. It showed an 8, leaving the dealer with 3 kings. "Now turn over the deck," Jake instructed. He reached over and slowly turned the deck upside down, leaving the bottom card in place. It was a 9, which would have given the dealer a full house. Jake ordered him, "Now turn over my hand." When he did, it showed 3 aces. "I had him beat," Jake said, "without my draw card." The 2 men who had backed away from the table glanced at the cards, looked at Jake. One said, "You still can't prove that he was going to take the card from the bottom." "If he wasn't, why did he go for his gun?" Jake charged. "Maybe he just didn't like being called a cheat," the man behind the bar called out. With those at the bar starting to intervene, Jake knew that he had to get out of there. His gun still drawn, he picked up the money in the pot before putting it all in his vest pocket. "I won this fair. You 2 dropped out and I had a hand beat before he started to cheat." Working his way out the door while keeping his gun ready, he backed out into the boardwalk. He fired a shot into the ceiling, causing everyone to duck. Jake heard the men moving around inside and talking before he turned and headed for the livery. Someone called out, "We need to go after him. It ain't right that he took our money after killing Ben." Reaching the livery, Jake looked around, saw that nobody had come in out of the saloon. After saddling his horse, he led it out the back door, where he mounted and rode out of town, knowing that the men in the saloon would be coming after him. He needed to get away from Santa Fe before they could organize.
And the tension mounts.
And that starts his ride for home.
That starts his ride for home. Yeah.
And in the process of going home, he runs into other troubles.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. So Lowell, what's next for you? I know that this book was just released a year ago. Are you working on another one?
I am. In fact, excuse me. After this book got published the first part of last year, I had another book published. It was called Mystery on Benchmark. And instead of it being in the 1800s, it's a modern day murder mystery that takes place. But then I would say in the next 2 weeks, I have a book coming from the printer that just got released, getting released this year. It's called Purgatory Valley. And it's a start of another series called the U.S. Marshal Milo Ryder series. And that's book 1 of it. And I'm working on book 2 of it right now.
Wow, ambitious. So I'm in awe. So what advice would you give to aspiring writers? And I'm particularly thinking of some of our youth. What would you tell them?
Well, when I was in high school, yeah, my idea of reading, and I wasn't an A student in high school, fact, I think I graduated with a D minus, but I went to college and did good in college. I didn't read a lot in high school, and I never thought about writing. I got advice when I was writing one time at a convention I was at for Rocky Mountain fiction writers. The gal that was given the talk up there made this comment: you cannot edit a blank page. And I know that a lot of people, when they start, and some people I've talked to, when they want to write something, they don't know what to do. So my advice to anyone who wants to write, even a youth, when you sit down, write down anything and everything that you're thinking about. And think about, you can't edit a blank page. If you put stuff down, you can go back and change it, add to it, delete it, do whatever you want with it, but it gives you a starting point.
Wise words, wise words. Well, Lowell, thank you. And again, I'm thinking of quite a few of our patrons at the library, our regular readers who are going to enjoy your books. We're going to get them up, and I'm going to put them on the staff pick shelf so that they will be available and attention will be called to them. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
I really appreciate it. I hope the rest of your week is wonderful.
Yours too. Thank you.